Hey, 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 this is Seagrove, and today I'm here with Frank Diaz talking about different formats, what makes them good and what makes them bad. So, a lot of people talk about older formats, oh, this format was the best, or, they have different opinions on that. What makes a format good?
I think the best the best gauge is how much skill impacts the outcome of matches,
Hmm.
right? So the real bad formats, uh, something like 2011, right after they had that midseason rotation, right after that it was a very luck-based format.
Okay.
But there's other formats where you know skill plays a bigger role, and I think those formats are better. I think other people, I think some people tend to judge it by like number of decks that are competitive or kind of the diversity in the format.
Hmm.
But that's just kind of how I personally
Okay.
judge it. It's what you like in a format though.
Yeah.
It's subjective.
All right, we'll come back to that second part, but in terms of skill, what's a good indicator of a skill-based format?
So I hate to keep going back to the 2011
Okay.
example, but after having played it for a little while, it becomes pretty obvious that it's a much simpler format than we had before,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't as much to sway things that year as there were maybe a couple years before it.
Yeah.
Um, Formats like 2008 were so considered very not very good at the time. I mean, still maybe not considered good, considered very skill based, but maybe not even considered good by a lot of people. Just because like one or two decks were dominating, it doesn't bother me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind not having a lot of different decks. I liked 2008.
Okay. Would you say this is a good format, a skill-based format? By your definition, good or not really?
Um, it's it's better than it has been.
Okay.
Um,
We
it,
see. Go ahead.
things kind of simplified down for a while, and they still kind of are. Um, and I think they've been that's been a conscious decision. It seems like
Okay.
to simplify things, to have less text on cards. Uh,
Hmm.
it's more 20 times 20 plus add 'em up math
Mm-hmm.
uh, versus kind of where it was. Um, but I think they've had some time to adapt to that and to design cards that um, kind of are still simple, but kind of strike the right balance
Yeah.
uh, in terms of allowing players to have some depth to the game.
What sort of cards were more complex? Like you were mentioning cards with more text, and now we just have 20 times and 20 plus. What are some examples of more complex cards that would make a more skill-based format that we used
So
to have?
yeah, like in 2010, I played Curse Guard, and if you take a look at the Gengar from what was the set? I don't even know the set anymore, but it was the Spiritomb Gengar deck. I got third place at Worlds with it back in 2010.
Oh, wow.
Um, the cards were uh, they were more complex back then. You can take a look back through the deck, even the basics, right? So there's like a shining dust skull, or yeah, a shining dust skull. There's all kinds of depth to the cards. If you look at just the amount of text, the amount of different things the card could do, it's moving damage counters. It's leveling up, it's devolving, it's dealing bench damage, it's dealing spread damage, it's
Okay.
going bench. Um, there's just so many things going on, and it's not even just the number of things going on. It's just the complexity of what's going on. Um, Different locks and things. It just seems like they made a conscious decision to kind of simplify what they were doing. I think it makes sense to do, but you got to do it carefully
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure that you're not just simplifying the game, right? You can
Right.
simplify, the cards themselves without making the game less complex.
Yeah. One thing that people say is an indicator of a skill-based format is that we see the same names at the top of regionals over and over. Is that a true indicator, or is that always the case?
Uh, So a little of both, right? So the same names are always going to be at the top. Um, so a format, I mean, it does kind of directionally give you the right indication, right? So if you're seeing a lot of the best names at the top, it seems like it's a format where skill is a bigger part of the format, right? So, that's going back to exactly what I said before, where, the amount of the amount of impact your skill has makes it a good format. So that's kind of by definition, like kind of built into my definition of it.
Yeah.
The ones where, the formats where the best players, come out on top are the good formats. Because
Yeah,
that's why the best players coming out on top.
for sure. Now, like you said, a lot of people consider decks a diversity of decks a good format. Why do you think that doesn't necessarily make it a good format? And well, Austin, yeah, start there. Why do you think that doesn't necessarily indicate a good or bad format?
So, for example, 2008,
Okay.
there was Guardy Gallade, there was Empoleon, and there were counter decks. And so it's, there wasn't a lot of diversity of the format, but I'd rather have, you know, 3, 4 decks and a lot of skill in the games than have, 12 different decks and it's all, a coin flip or crapshoot.
Yeah.
That's kind of the risk you run. I think um, we've had some formats recently where there's a lot of different decks, but they're all basically doing the same thing.
Right.
And so if you're just cookie cuttering out, your 12 attackers and that's it, that can also, make it seem like there's a lot of different decks when I don't
Okay.
know, really.
Yeah. Um, excuse me. Can you give me some example of cards recently that are causing um, poor, or not poor, but low skill cards, like maybe not necessarily coin flip cards, but luck based cards? Um, I've heard. Go ahead.
So coin flip cards aren't necessarily what I mean, right? So you can
Okay.
have, you know, it'd be hypocritical of me. I did really well back in 2015 when Hypnotoxic Laser was a big part of the format.
Hmm.
Yes, there's luck there, but there's also skill to it too, right? So, um, just looking at flip cards is not a big deal. For In terms of a recent example of things that are making things less skillful.
People have mentioned Max Elixir. What do you think about that?
So Max Elixir might have been, an issue back when it saw play. Doesn't see
Yeah.
play anymore, and so maybe that's a good thing, right? So maybe you're not seeing cards that are coin flip as often,
Hmm.
but that's not really uh, the the issue. So for example, right now we don't have a lot of lock decks, right? So we have a lot of like real weak, not very good lock decks.
Yeah.
Got
Noivern.
soft locks. We have lots of ways to get out of locks.
Yeah.
So it's made locking your opponent not really part of the game.
Hmm.
Um, and when the brakes come off on that, then it becomes a crazy fist fight, and you're just go 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 go. Um, and I think that can cause an issue, right? So if you get up on turn 2, there's not a lot of coming back in this format.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really where it's more about the coin flip in your opening hand, maybe the first hand you draw after that. Um, that really you know that can decide things sometimes, right? But
Right.
at the same time, you do have a lot of top players doing well on a consistent basis. So I think actually recently, very recently, the format's been pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't mind more room for a little bit of creativity. I think things do seem like they're not changing as much with new sets coming out or not there's not the same complexity I'm talking about.
Okay.
Um,
Because decks have changed, but
so decks have changed, right? So you got Zora comes out, you see coming out in Japan, but it's not so Zora is
it's a similar archetype, is what you're saying. Like it's still just two shotting instead of one shotting, but it's just attacking and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're just spending time fist fighting.
Yeah.
Um, and it's fine. You know, that's just what happens to be good right now. We have a different rotation than Japan does, and so I think the cards are being designed not for the current format that we are experiencing, but for
Hmm.
Japan's format. So they're designing cards thinking that Seismitoad and Trevenant are all legal, and we're sitting here with a format last year the format was tighter than Japan's, but this year it's even tighter than that. So we're, completely removed. So every dragon Pokemon is bad right now because
Right.
that double dragon energy is legal, right? So they're designing cards like double dragon energy is legal, and so there's a lot of unintended consequences of having a different
Hmm.
format than Japan's, and I think that's where a lot of the problems come from.
Very interesting.
Have the same lock decks. Noivern doesn't get to be a deck because it can't put on a double dragon.
Right. Um, do you think having I don't want to necessarily call it centralized meta, but like a tier zero deck, do you think that's good or bad for the meta?
Um, it depends. It depends on why that deck's tier one, right? So if you have something that's just real dominant and then you get down to just coin flips all the time, you can lose depth there. But
Yeah.
sometimes you have, a dominant deck, but then, something that it tends to correct itself, right? So we haven't had a lot of that recently. I think they've done a decent job balancing things, as much as you can with this stuff.
Okay.
It it used to be less balanced.
Hmm.
So I think in terms of a directional trend over the years, we've been moving in the right direction.
That's awesome. All right. Well, that's it for me. Do you have anything you want to add, or if not, do you have any shout outs you want to give?
Just shout out, good luck to everybody playing out in at Dallas is this weekend.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm looking forward to coming out to some events. I know I'm going to go, Toronto and Roanoke, but that's out, in May. So I'm, enjoying a little bit of time off from the big events, but I'm looking forward to getting back in it.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, and that's it.
Thank you.